article that was released that said that there was a handful of Google engineers that quit because apparently Bard was actually learning on top of ChatGPT, which they felt was either
cheating?
illegal or unethical or something, right? So the point is, I think we've talked about this for a while, but all of these models will converge in the absence of highly unique data, right? What I've been calling these white truffles. So if you can hoard white truffles, your model will be better. Otherwise, your model will be the same as everybody else's model. And then you have the distribution endpoints, of which there are many whose economic incentives are very high, right? So Facebook doesn't want to just sit around and have all this traffic go to ChatGPT. They want to be able to enable Instagram users and WhatsApp users and Facebook users to interact through Messenger or what have you. Obviously, Google has many hundreds of billions of reasons to defend their territory. So I think all of this to me just means that these are really important use cases. As an investor, I think it's important to just stay a little patient because it's not clear to me that there are any natural blockers. But I do think that David's right, that it's demonstrating a use case that's important, but it's still so early. We are 6 weeks in.
Yeah, I tell you, I think there's a couple of great blockers here, or there's going to be an M&A bonanza for Silicon Valley. If you look at certain data sets, Reddit, Stack Overflow for programming, and Quora, these things are going to be worth a fortune. And to be able to buy those or get exclusive licenses to those, if you're Google Bard or if you're ChatGPT, that could be a major difference maker. Twitter's data set, obviously. And then you look at certain tools like Zapier and If This Then That. They've spent a decade building the sort of, Meta API. That would be an incredible blocker. I think this is going to be like a balkanization
I'll be honest
so many
with you,
oil sources.
Zapier already did it for free. They did a plugin for free.
Exactly. I was just going to say, I don't think these are not blockers. I don't think this is the ace of hearts on a flush board. I don't think so. I think that these things are really interesting assets. They are definitely truffly in nature, but they may not be the 10-pound white truffle from Alba that we're looking for.
But on the M&A side, don't you think this would be like incredible?
No, but the only reason I say that again is it is just so early. Like in the text, I mentioned this to you guys. I remember, and Sachs and I were in the middle of this. We were both right at the beginning of social networking. Sachs started Genie. I was in the middle of AIM. And all of a sudden, we saw Reed start SocialNet. Then we saw Friendster get started. Then we saw MySpace get started. And you have to remember, when you look back now, 20 years later, the winner was the seventh company, which was Facebook. Not the first, not the second. It was the seventh, which started 2.5 years properly after the entire Web 2.0 phenomenon started.
Yeah. Same with search, by the way, where Google was probably 20th to the scene.
Yeah, Excite, Lycos.
If you want to be a real student of business history, I'll just say something that's more meta, which is if there's something that I've learned on the heels of this SVB fiasco, is that there is an enormous amount of negative perception of Silicon Valley, and frankly, a lot of disdain for VCs and prognosticating technologists, right? And I think that
So you mean this podcast?
I think we have to be very careful. Yeah, and I do think that we are an example of that because we are the bright, shiny object of the people that were successful. And the broad makeup of America thinks that we're not nearly as smart as we all think we are. And after all of this money that's been burned in crypto land and NFTs and all of this Web3 nonsense, to yet again whip up the next hype cycle, I think doesn't serve us well. So I do think there's something very important here, but I think if we want to maintain reputational capital through this cycle, because government will get involved much faster in this cycle, I think it's important to just be methodical and thoughtful, iterate, experiment, but it's too early to call it, I guess is what I would say.
Yeah, it's definitely too early to call it, but Sachs, you're saying explicitly you think this is bigger than the internet itself, bigger than mobile as a platform shift.
It's definitely top 3, and I think it might be the biggest ever. I think things could certainly play out the way that Chamath is saying. However, I actually think that OpenAI has demonstrated now with these platform features that it has a lead, a substantial lead, and I actually think that lead is likely to grow in the next year. And let me tell you why. I think it's got a couple of assets here that are hard to replicate. So number one, user attention. I think they've now got I would guess, hundreds of millions of users, and this thing is caught on like wildfire. It must have been beyond their wildest dream. I think it even surprised them how much this has taken off. It's really captured the public's imagination, and people are discovering new use cases for it every day. If you are sort of the number 2 or number 3 or the 7th large language model to basically get deployed behind a chatbot, I just don't think you're going to get that kind of distribution because the novelty factor will have worn off and people will have already kind of learned to use ChatGPT. So number 1 is the hundreds of millions of eyeballs. Number 2 is with this developer platform, I think we should describe a couple of other features of it. One of the problems with ChatGPT, if you've used it, is that the training data ends in 2021. And so you very rapidly, for many questions, get to a stopping point where it says, like, I don't know the answer to that because I don't have any information about the last 2 years. Well, one of the plugins that OpenAI has introduced itself is called the browsing plugin. And it allows ChatGPT to go search the internet and not just run internet searches, but to run an internet search as if it were a human. So you ask ChatGPT a question and it goes to find, it runs a search, and then it scours through the list of 20 links and it doesn't stop until it finds a good answer. And then it comes back to you with just the answer. So it actually saves you the time of clicking through all those loops, and it'll give you the browsing history to show you what it did. That's mind blowing. They also have a thing called a retrieval API, which allows developers to share proprietary knowledge bases with ChatGPT. So if you have a company knowledge base or some other kind of content, you can share it with ChatGPT so that ChatGPT can be aware of that. And there are some privacy concerns, but the company has said they're going to sandbox that data and protect it. As an example, I'm planning on writing a book on SaaS using ChatGPT, and I'm going to put together all the previous articles and talks I've done as a database so I can then work with that in ChatGPT. So you're going to have more and more developers sharing information with ChatGPT. You're going to have ChatGPT able to update its training based on sort of the last 2 years, being able to search the internet. And I think that as those hundreds of millions of users use the product and as developers keep sharing more and more of these data sets, the AI is going to get smarter and smarter. And then what's going to happen is both consumers and developers are going to want to use or build on the smartest API.